Our next honoree, Ed Lewis, will be honored posthumously. So I get to actually do the introduction myself, and then Paul Barnes, who's manager of sales and marketing for GNW's Northern region, will come to the stage to accept the award on behalf of Ed, and actually has a letter from Ed's family too, which I'm looking forward to hearing read. So Ed Lewis. Like many lifelong railroaders, Edward Lewis's lifelong love affair with trains and railroads began when he was a child. Growing up in Ho-Ho-Kus, New Jersey, I had to look that up to make sure that was real before I read it on stage. Growing up in Ho-Ho-Kus, New Jersey, he would explore, often by bicycle, rail lines and stations in his home state and in New York. To indulge his interest, his parents and his sister made frequent detours to visit railroads during family trips, something he would then repeat with his own family years later. Ed officially began his career in the railroad industry in 1963 at the Long Island Railroad, where he served as a clerk. He was assistant to the president and general manager of the Arcade and Attica Railroad in New York, then auditor of freight revenue at the Providence and Worcester Railroad, VP of the Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania, and secretary-treasurer and GM of the Lamoille Valley Railroad Company in Vermont. In 1987, Ed Lewis was the first company outsider to be hired as president of the Aberdeen and Rockfish Railroad in North Carolina. He eventually held that position for 20 years until 2007. It was Lewis who decided to take a chance on the PD River Railway, a 20-mile line that CSX had spun off. Soon after A&R leased the railroad in 1987, Willamette Industries built a $350 million paper mill, and that was real money back in 1987, providing crucial business that continues to this day. Collaborating with economic developers, Ed Lewis was able to attract other shippers to the PDRR, including Mohawk Carpet and Arauco. Lewis's interest in railroads extended beyond his work managing them. He wrote several books about railroads that often featured photographs he took himself. In 1971, he published his first book, The Wellsville, Addison, and Gallatin Railroad Sole Leather Line, which told the history of the WAG, as it was known. He wrote several other books, I won't name them all here, but his most well-known book remains his American Short Line Railway Guide, which was a directory of small railroads, the original directory of small railroads, featuring facts, figures, and detailed locomotive rosters of hundreds of US short lines. Numerous editions of this guide were published by Comback Publishing, and at least one edition was produced with the assistance of the Short Line Association. Copies of the guide can still be found to this day in our offices in Washington, D.C., and the association has called his book the original gold standard of statistical and historical information for short lines. Lewis was an avid collector of railroad ephemera, including historic railroad passes, timetables, maps, and tickets. At one time, he maintained arguably the most comprehensive collection of railroad timetables and historic stock certificates in North America. Edward Lewis passed away on November 11th, 2015, after battling Parkinson's disease. He remains highly regarded by industry professionals and is remembered fondly by many of us as Mr. Shortline. So with that, I will welcome Paul to the stage to accept the award on Edward's behalf.
Thanks, Chuck. Good morning, fellow shortliners and allies. Today I'll present two sets of acceptance remarks. The first set from the family of the late Ed Lewis, and the second from me. Speaking of Ed, I dressed up for the occasion this morning in his memory. This ASLRRA necktie and train tie clip are from his personal collection. We are so pleased and appreciative of the great honor you are bestowing upon our father. Since losing Dad in 2015, we have been looking for ways to honor his memory, and it appears the ASLRRA has beaten us to the punch by inducting him into the Short Line Hall of Fame. Railroading was always an important part of our lives growing up because Dad took us along for the ride, literally. We've been to countless depots engine houses, sidings, covered bridges, crossings, train yards, and scenic overlooks. And Dad's love of, commitment to, and perhaps obsession with the industry was always front and center. We know he would have been very proud of this honor, and we know that he'd want to share it with all of his great friends and colleagues in railroading. On behalf of Ed Lewis, thank you so much for this honor, and on our behalf, thank you for promoting and supporting the industry that gave Dad such pleasure. And from my perspective, I always looked forward to meeting with my friend and mentor, Ed Lewis. Our meetings often occurred over meals of his favorite Carolina barbecue and all-you-can-eat shrimp. He and I regularly expounded on the state of our beloved industry while we outlined in detail our professional opinions and solutions. Ed drew on his extensive experience in and knowledge of the short line industry to support his points. He truly was a living, breathing, walking encyclopedia of railroad stuff, and I was always amazed at how much he really knew. Ed never gossiped, never talked about others, except to ask how they were doing or to give them accolades. He truly walked the talk and enjoyed sharing this passion for railroads with others. At whichever railroad he led, people clamored to work with Ed. He wasn't a Wick Mormon nor a Michael Ward, but he was just as strong a leader. Ed innovated through learning from history and not repeating mistakes previously learned from. He led more by example, not by intimidation. He took care of, respected, and empowered his employees, always going more than the extra mile for them, and they in turn went the extra mile for him. Ed never called the team his family, but it was certainly implied. As a result of getting to know Ed, I've learned that if an organization has to describe itself as a family, chances are it's not. So many leaders today could have learned much from Ed. This honor which the association posthumously bestows upon him today is justly deserved. On behalf of the Lewis family, thank you very much.